American faith communities, especially the clergy, need to stand up and speak out against domestic terrorism.
Yes, but the primary work that American faith communities have to do in regard to domestic terrorism is internal.
The American Religious Town Hall is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
I'm James Weingartner, sitting in for Jerry Lutz during the COVID lockdown. Jerry's been unable to travel to be here with us, but we're glad that you have made it to watch this week. And we have some distinguished panelists to give you some thoughts on the topic today. And we'd like them to introduce themselves to you. And so we'll begin with John on my right.
My name is Canon John Peterson. I am a priest in the Episcopal Church, and I'm canonically resident in the Diocese of Washington, D.C.
Hi, I'm Carl Troval. I am professor of ethics and history at Concordia University in Austin, Texas.
My name is Tom Plumley. I'm a minister in the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ. I serve as senior minister at First Christian Church, Fort Worth, Texas.
Hi, I'm Tony Matthews, and I serve as senior pastor at North Garland Baptist Fellowship in Garland, Texas.
After 9/11, grave threats to America, to democracy, to freedoms, religious and otherwise, and to our very lives dominated our thoughts. The American Religious Town Hall responded with various programs about terrorism from abroad. We did a two-part series titled America at War and a four-part series of shows on the war on terror. These included panel discussions of war and peace, free speech, identity cards, the monitoring of various ethnic groups, and the trade-offs between security and liberty. We had other related programs on the clash of human rights, on 9/11 trauma and our mental health, and particularly on the family of faith identified with terror, Islam. Now, after January 6th and the first assault on the U.S. Capitol since the War of 1812, terrorism dominates our thoughts once again. However, this time, it's domestic terrorism fomented by Americans, and the faith family identified with terror is Christianity. One may argue, though we were very slow to do so with Islam, that blame lies only in a particular virulent strain of the church, in those who espouse a set of beliefs known as Christian nationalism. Nevertheless, the point remains that this time, the terrorist may live just down the street, and those who share his or her thinking may be in our congregations, in our families, among our viewers, and among our friends. As an aside, there was a rabbi among the January 6th insurrectionists, and probably at least a few Jews in the mob. So our questions apply in that faith family as well. And those questions are: one, how do faith communities respond when terrorism is right here at home? Two, how can we speak out as religious institutions, and have we? Three, what help can we provide for members who struggle with some of the same issues that led up to January 6th, or who have Christian nationalists in their families and among their friends? And so we put these questions to our panelists, and we begin with Carl.
Thank you very much. I believe that it's very important for the clergy in America, particularly Protestant clergy, to stand up. After all, 3 out of 5 white evangelicals say that Joe Biden was not legitimately elected, which is deeply concerning that so many evangelicals, white evangelicals, would believe that lie. And so I think it's really important for pastors to stand up in particular and be clear about the importance of following the truth. But I really want to take this in a bit of a different direction in that as I was looking at hate groups and QAnon and Christian nationalism, I think that one of the pieces that pastors are going to need to do, and any of us who are leaders, is to help people understand how do we actually bring ourselves into conversation with people to change their minds. And I listened to an incredible podcast called On the Media, and it was about, it's the most recent one. Well, we're taped, so it isn't the most recent one, but it is in early February. And there were people in there who talked about how they got out of certain kinds of hate groups and ideologies. And one of the most important things is that if you just confront people directly and oppose their ideology, it does not work. In fact, they are primed to actually take you on and to have an argument. And it actually embeds them even further in their belief system. And so I think that what pastors need to do is lead and following the example of Jesus, and that really the first thing that they said that's important for clergy to do is, well, not clergy, for people to do, is to have compassion, have non-judgmental compassion for people who are a part of any group. Because usually what's motivating people is not the ideology, it's that they're filled with profound pain and shame and hurt. And what they're looking for is acceptance, they're looking for value, they're looking for safety, they're looking for identity. And a lot of times these ideologies essentially are serving as a function to build identity. But ultimately, with that compassion, the second kind of piece, by the way, the common denominators in people who are involved in extremist groups, alienation, trauma, shame, and abuse. And so what's important is that we exemplify compassion, non-judgmental care. You can judge, I guess, what someone believes, but not to judge the person. And the second piece is to ask what this particular group or this ideology is doing for them that's positive, that's building their life, and to let them work out the details of what that is, and to continue to ask questions about what the nature is of that particular belief system. And since Christian nationalism is so rooted in Protestant Christianity, I think Protestant pastors are in a very special place to be able to help people wrestle through this using theological terminology that they understand and biblical concepts. So that's at least a start.
Thanks, Carl.
Thank you. I think, Dr. Trovall, you've given us a great start to the conversation. I think perhaps the most disturbing thing about what happened on the 6th of January was that we began to realize that we could be living next door to the terrorist because they looked a whole lot like me, picture after picture after picture were folks that kind of had scruffy white beards and almost to a person were white males. I had to stop my walks when I got COVID, but up to that point, even well after the election, my neighborhood was still filled with great big huge flags showing Donald Trump looking like Rambo, and Trump posters in the yards long after the election. And it's not just the big mouth that shouts crazy stuff. We also found out that a lot of the folks at 6 January assaulting the Capitol were doctors, accountants, police officers, veterans of our wars, our recent wars, elders and deacons in our churches in some cases. many folks waving Bibles and carrying crosses and wearing crosses. So it is plain that the faith family, as you said in your moderator statement, the faith family identified with this particular event of terrorism and this kind of terrorism that is abroad is Christianity. And so it is up to Christians, Christian communities, to do the work that's necessary. In addition to some of the things that Dr. Trovall laid out, I would like to add that we need to have a refresher course from some of the courses that we had in some of our churches back in the 70s and 80s when our teenage children were being drawn off into religious cults. We need to have some refresher courses on what a cult is, because some of that behavior that we've seen is very cult-like. You can't go in with that word too much, or lots of folks are not going to listen to you anymore. It begins a lot of patience, but a refusal to be put off, because we are easily put off by the charge that we're meddling in politics when we do this. No, we're not. We're getting to the basics of what's going on in the lives of our people and our neighbors, and dealing with the needs that are being projected out in this ugly way, and trying to determine how we can lovingly bring people into spaces where they can be changed, and this whole culture can be reshaped in a more healthy form.
Thank you. Tony?
Yeah, this is a very relevant topic. I appreciate the comments that our colleagues have made. Let me start with the church and pastors, since I'm a pastor and a preacher. I think what we've seen over the last, in particular the last couple of years, and last year with a lot of the violence, the racial tension, the political tension, the pandemic, all these things converged and wreaked havoc in society. I think church members, parishioners, they should understand that pastors are not exempted from getting involved in politics and preaching issues biblically. Throughout my 30 plus years of pastoring, every now and then I'll hear someone say that pastors shouldn't be involved in politics. The prophets were keenly aware of what was going on politically. They spoke to issues, but they weren't necessarily controlled by them. I believe that pastors and preachers should be politically conscious, but not politically controlled. I also believe that pastors and preachers, I always tell our young pastors, listen, don't rise with the applause or sink with the boos from the congregation, because you're going to get them both. So you have to kind of be anchored and speak to issues. What I saw, I want to just be on record, and I'm on record saying it before, but I want to be on record saying what I saw on January 6th is appalling. I thought it was awful. I thought it was not representative of Christianity, and I think it should be dealt with legally. Having said that, I read an article, and I'm influenced greatly by Jason Meyer, who wrote an article on these things. And he talks about the three nuances that he saw. And one thing he mentioned is that we can't overreact or underreact to what we saw on January 6th. And he says that we should not lump everyone into the same category, because there were a lot of people there whose motives were to just, protest, just like we saw with many other folks with the George Floyd killing. I had to tell people were saying all the folks there were bad and all the African Americans were, they're rioters and thugs. I said, that's not true. You had people there who were actually protesting, so we can't lump them all together. The second nuance he mentions is that we would never want to charge everyone who was at that pro-Trump rally with idolatry, just blindly following him, because that would equally be wrong. The third thing is that he says when the symbols of Christianity are melded together with the symbols of political identity, then those of us who love the name of Christ, we need to do everything we can to pull them apart. I love that, because you can't. What we saw, as Brother Tom mentioned, the Christian flag, the crosses. I saw one person with the Confederate flag going through the through the Capitol. The noose, these to amalgamate those symbols with Christianity does Christianity great harm. And I remember the movie The Chronicles of Riddick. And one of those scenes, one of the guys mentioned that I've done some unthinkable things in the name of a faith that's not my own. We saw some unthinkable things that didn't represent Christianity on January 6th. And we'll say more about that later on.
John?
Yes. I find this to be a painful subject. And I wish that I could be as optimistic as you, Carl, in your statements in relationship to how does one build bridges between the church, the synagogue, the mosque, and the demonstrators. How is that done when it's so antithetical to everything that we stand for? In preparation for this program, I thought, well, I'm going to go to see what historians have said. So I went to the Organization of American Historians, because I knew that they would have a historical perspective on what happened on January 6th in the attack on the United States Capitol. And I want to read the first sentence that these historians wrote. Wednesday, January 6, 2021, will live in infamy. And where do we hear of that before? As the day when democracy in the United States sustained a direct assault from domestic terrorists. I want to say quite bluntly that the Christian national movement has nothing to do with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Instead, it reflects a political ideology that I would argue is anti the values of Jesus Christ. And when you are in a situation like that, how do we have these conversations, particularly when the government, heads of government, were actually involved? The former president and 2 senators and 8 or 9 members from the House of Representatives. How do we start a conversation then to be able to deal with what the gospel of Jesus Christ is all about? And that, to me, is the nut that I'm not able to crack, because I do not know how to do it.
Wow. Go ahead, Tom.
I'm going. Go.
No. I think, speaking to what Ken and John mentioned, I think the conversation needs to take place. And I think we should ask the question to some who were on that side. Right. Do you think Christian nationalism was birthed out of an attempt to destroy Christianity? That would be a question that that we should be a starter question. People may not like the answer, but at least it would give those individuals an opportunity to start a conversation.
More questions and answers after the break.
We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you and today's closing statements.
Welcome back. We hope that you do write in and let us know what you think of these programs, the thoughts that are expressed, and what other topics and programs that you'd like to hear in the future. Let's sum up now, beginning on my right, again with John.
Thank you. I think that it has to, in all fairness, be said that January 6th is not just simply the result of our former president's presidency, or members of the House of Representatives or senators that were supportive of it. I think that the fact that this Capitol was stormed by white supremacists is a sign of a disease, a plague to us of racism that goes long before the insurrection on the 6th of January. And how we start dealing with our latent and our systemic racism, I think, is a real problem. And I think that this is certainly a challenge that the church faces. I certainly think this is what all religious bodies face today, is to start dealing with that core problem. Because I suspect at the very root of this, just think on that day, 2 senators from Georgia became members of the House of became members of the Senate. They were sworn in on that day. A black man and a Jew. And what does white supremacy represent?
Tom?
Thank you. Yes, I really appreciate that. And John, I appreciate the fact that you held up for us the difficulty of just thinking that this is going to be easy. This is something that's embedded deep within us, and I think that this program has helped us to have to struggle with it. One of the things I would ask our viewers is to have patience. Have patience not only with each other and with other people in your congregation, but have patience with your ministers, with your rabbis, with your imams. Have patience with the people who are leading your congregation, because they're struggling as well to try to figure out how to call out the big lie, how to in a good way tell people that we really don't have a bunch of Satan worshiping pedophiles who are cannibals that run our government. We really don't have that. That is not the truth. And people are going to be trying to say that in lots of different ways. And as we call out all the various conspiracy theories, please have patience with us as we're working to try to help our congregations move in the right direction.
Thank you, Tony.
Yeah, a few quick things. I think it's important for the church to remain balanced. When we see atrocities that happen on January 6th, we need to say something about it. And we also need to say something about the other side when we see people storming police stations and setting fires. So I think that's, in that way, we'll have credibility, or more credibility. The second thing, I want to quote a scholar about Christian nationalism. He says that if Christian nationalism means a good Christian is equated with being a good American, and being a good American is the same thing as being a good Christian, that's faulty. Because there are good Americans who are not Christians and some good Christians who are not Americans. And the last thing I want to say is that the mission of the church is not to make America great again, or whatever President Biden's slogan is. The mission of the church is to make Christ known. And so we have to keep that focused. We have to keep the main thing, and major on the major things and not the minor things.
Beautiful. Carl?
I appreciate the clear condemnation of what happened at the insurrection, and maybe I didn't start making that assertion strongly enough, but I certainly want to do that. Your comments remind me of H. Richard Niebuhr's Christ and Culture, and one of the dangers is the Christ of culture, in which you somehow conflate your cultural identity and your religious identity, your Christian identity specifically for Niebuhr. And that is exactly the problem. I mean, you've essentially made the government and the system, the Constitution, Christian nationalism has essentially made the nation an idol in which it worships it rather than God, who stands in judgment over the nation. And I think it's important for those of us who are clergy and theologians to really emphasize that kind of idolatry that's occurring. And some of my comments, too, were made earlier more as a way to talk about how do we prevent people from falling into some of these ideologies as well, because an ounce of prevention's worth a pound of cure.
Thank you. The charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. The rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America, we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. Now, friends, until next week at the same time and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. May the God of all of us bless all of you.